Let's get more on this now from Michel Bruneau. He's a professor of civil, structural, and environmental engineering at the University of Buffalo. He's joining us from Buffalo in New York. Professor, nearly a month on now from these earthquakes, Türkiye is launching a national risk shield model so it can be better prepared for future disasters. So what can we learn from a disaster like this in Türkiye and Syria in the hopes of being better prepared?
So generally speaking, well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. Pleased to be here this morning. Generally speaking, when we deal with disasters, we recognize that it is a multi-stakeholder endeavor. And so, for example, the goal of earthquake engineering is to design infrastructure that can resist earthquakes, obviously, but it requires engineers, architects, social scientists, public policy experts, the government, politicians, and the public to all agree on this common objective and to find a consensus on how to approach this. And sometimes that consensus does not exist even within a single one of these groups. They all sometimes have clashing priorities across the groups. And I'm describing that at great length in my book, The Blessings of Disasters, in ways that makes it clear for people who are non-experts to understand. But what a disaster like this makes possible, it makes it possible for folks to agree and to focus on some of these objectives. It's not a guarantee that it will happen, but the odds are good. And in fact, it'd be a shame to miss on that opportunity. So there's two issues in this case to answer your questions that are huge, and you know them as well as anybody: the reconstruction and to update current practices, and the retrofit, what to do with the existing inventory. Because while the earthquake hit this part of the Anatolia Fault, of course, I don't think you can escape anywhere in Turkey from being close to an earthquake fault, and Istanbul, as was mentioned earlier, is definitely one of the area where this could strike again in the future.
So, as Turkey starts to rebuild these cities that were devastated, what would you suggest as their best approach to ensuring safe and earthquake resistant construction?
So it will take a while, first of all. This is a process that will stretch way over 10 years. So that's what we've seen in Christchurch. And what the earthquake has done is it has changed the momentum. And we've seen that in past earthquakes before, where there's a certain way of building things that was there prior to an earthquake. And it was there because changing the way of doing things would have required going into an uncertain territory. The momentum comes with known prices, known values, known ways of proceeding, those ways of constructing, and the earthquake reshuffles the deck, and the momentum is now recreated in a new direction. So there's going to be a new way of doing things, and there's no one size fits all. I mean, there's a lot of structural systems out there. We're not dealing with stretch paths, we're dealing with engineered buildings. So there's got to be not a unique system, that each building has its own characteristics and needs and operation objectives, but it can be done. I mean, we've seen it from Christchurch. Some of it comes, in fact, bottom up. It comes from the public. It's not uncommon for people to want to meet the architect on a project to see what the building will look like. What we've seen after Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand is that the public wanted to meet with the engineer in charge of the project to know what kind of structural system will be used and how it will ensure continuity of business and operations. So the devil is in the detail. Any project devoted to reducing risk of disaster requires a level of commitment and resources. And so the success of this endeavor on the long run will depend on the sustained efforts in that direction. But upfront, you have the expertise in Turkey. I was talking to a former PhD student of mine who now is in Turkey, has been there for decades, and he was a consultant for the design of base isolated hospitals that have performed very well in the epicentral region. So you do have many hundreds and many thousands of engineers in Turkey that are trained in structural engineering and how to do earthquake resistant buildings. And so should not be a problem.
So, of course, the earthquake is in the forefront of everyone's mind now, but there are other disasters that are also being considered, and what we can learn to be better prepared for those. So, what are the main challenges of preparing for multiple disasters, not just earthquakes, but also things like wildfires and floods?
So it's pretty much the same recipe. You identified first the hazard, which is the easy part, and from there you're into that multiplayer game again, where you have to make sure everybody's on track and understand the same objectives and agrees to those, because it will come with cost, it will come with planning, it will come with strategic decisions to be made. And as I said, it's a long run process. And so if there is a commitment and the resources to do it, it can be done. I think multi-hazard as an objective makes perfect sense. It's a logical thing to do. But that stating the objective is nobody would object to that, right? The devil is in the detail. It's like saying in the U.S. we say motherhood and apple pie. Who's against that? But when it's coming to how do you implement it, that it's important to have a strategy that everybody agrees upon.
All right, Professor Michel Bruneau joining us from Buffalo, New York. Thank you.